friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Ellenvoss, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. This week we have a very special show with my friend Sarah Rossington, who is also known as the Hardcore Therapist. And she is awesome. We've been friends for several years. We met through the Bhakti yoga world. And we will be talking today about why is life so hard? That's like the overarching topic of today's discussion. And with Sarah's background in therapy, her work with kids, her work as a mother, and her also appreciation of music and culture, we're going to have a really fun conversation today. If you want to learn more about Sarah's work, I highly recommend you check out her website, The Hardcore Therapist. She's also on Instagram, on Facebook. And one of the things that she does that's really neat is if you buy any of her merch that has like cool logos and like if you're into hardcore music, you'll really like her stuff. But for every purchase you make of her merchandise or merch, she uses that money to help pay for people's therapy who might otherwise not have access to therapy. And she goes to hardcore music shows and sets up booths to help people learn more about mental health resources, which is so amazing. So please support Sarah's work by buying her cool things. If you want to work with Sarah as a patient, she does have some spaces available in her practice, and I'll include a link in the notes where you can find her. And without further ado, we're going to turn it over now and let's dive right into our conversation.
Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Sarah. Sarah. It's good.
I always make a mistake when I'm talking at some point when I talk, and I always think it's hilarious. So
I love it. I mean, I think so much of what is great about your podcast, and I think mine too, is that we don't do fancy edits. Like we just kind of roll with it. And if the dog comes in and is chewing on her bone, or if we fumble over words, we just sort of let it roll. And that's life, isn't it? I mean, that's what we have to do.
For sure. So this is something that I'm excited because we're doing like a hybrid podcast, which I have some other people I'm supposed to do this with, and you're my first now. So I'm super stoked.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be fun to see how this talk kind of reaches both my audience, more like the plant herbalist type, and then your audience, the hardcore therapists, or your hardcore people, and then people that are interested in bhakti and self-help and spirituality. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of crossover, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where these topics take us and how people respond and what they gather from them.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that I know you've heard my interviews. I usually ask people about hardcore, but obviously you're not a hardcore.
I don't have any hardcore.
But the thing that I thought was really cool was last week when you messaged me and when I asked you about going to the den, and you were talking about community and how similarly you feel about that community compared to my hardcore community. I'm like, that is fantastic. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like music in general, like different music genres, bring people together. There's something, when a type of music hits you and speaks to you and is like your own kind of therapy container, right?
Yeah.
You gather certain people, and when you really know the music and it's become a part of your life, you can't help but love other people who love that. You're like, you know what I know. We've been in, for you, the mosh pits together, and in my world, the spinning psychedelic space.
I've been there. I've done that.
You've done that too. Well, of course you have. You've done everything, Sarah.
It's not true. But I think I've told you my closest, oldest friend, Stephanie, is a deadhead. And so when we were kids, with Jerry was still there. We used to go, and I sold burritos and it was always like, what am I doing here? But it was cool. So
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I would sell hemp jewelry, and because I like did all the macrame,
yeah.
and then I would sell grilled cheeses to
Oh
grilled
yeah.
cheese sandwiches. I mean, it was like a whole scene. It was pretty cool back in the 90s.
It was, and I will say, I think those were some of the best grilled cheese sandwiches I've ever eaten, is eating grilled cheese on Shakedown Street.
Totally, I agree. There's some magic in
There
those
are,
grilled
there,
cheese.
for sure. So, we were talking. So, by the way, everyone, Ashley and I are very close friends. So we talk all the time. But we were talking about like, why is life so hard? Was the
Yes, that was what we wanted. We were like, I forget how it happened. I was somewhere and it was like, oh, I think I was meditating and I was like, I need to talk with Sarah about why is life so hard? And Sarah was like, yes, because like there's a lot in there. And I think it's just a question we all struggle with is like, why? Like,
Mhm.
and what is hard? Like what's hard about life? And why, like how do we deal with that? And for you, with your background in therapy, working with kids and I mean, you're a full-time therapist, like you get to hear a lot of hardships, you get to really
Yeah.
help people dive into the tough stuff. So yeah, why don't you start us off? Why is life so hard, Sarah?
I don't know. I mean, I was actually funny because I was thinking about it in two different ways. And I was thinking about it in a spiritual way and not just a therapeutic way. So like for me, I think sometimes we have hardships in our life, and because how are we going to experience the good and
Mm,
it be so good when we can experience that? If you don't know the difference and it's always just good all the time, you wouldn't appreciate and you wouldn't love and you wouldn't be so excited. And I think that, you know, that's part of it. I also think we as humans make things a lot harder in life than we need to,
mm.
so sometimes it comes from like that, inner child stuff, that's a big thing for me that I work with clients, is inner child work, is like I knew how to navigate my family by keeping the peace by doing these things, which actually is making my life harder because I'm not being authentic to myself. And
Wow.
so those are like, for me, I think like two of the main things of why life is so hard. I also just think in the United States, we are overprogrammed, overstimulated all the time. And just it's almost like you're guilty feeling if you are doing anything that isn't some sort of work or working towards or bettering yourselves. And just like this idea of just being is a very difficult thing for people. And I think if you could just learn how to just be, you would actually have way more happiness in your life.
I
That's
love
what
that.
I think.
Yeah, totally. That makes, yeah, we do complicate our lives and make things more challenging. And it's interesting. That reminds me, something that just came up for in our family. So we have been looking for a summer nanny because our current nanny told us that she has to leave because she has some health stuff and wants to travel over the summer. So I hired another nanny who I thought would work out, who did not work out because we went on a date night on her first night there. And then she somehow thought because we'd be home in 15 minutes, she could just roll out. She could just leave our kids in bed, home alone. And they're like 5 and 8. Like, that's not okay. So
What?
I know. So I had to terminate. I had to just tell her, I was like, okay, thank you for coming. This isn't going to work out because if you can't make those sorts of choices, then this isn't going
Yeah.
to work. So but here's the cool thing is, like, I started off in the death spiral of how this is going to ruin the summer and how it's all, like, how, what am I going to do? I need to find someone next week. But instead, again, like, this is like the making life so hard, like these expectations I had and these plans I had and the ideas I had of how the summer was going to look with this nice scheduled, perfect system. And now that that's been dismantled, my husband and I were like, what if we don't have childcare this summer? What if we just go rogue? What if we just together try to figure out our lives with our family, with our kids, and not have anyone else here? And like maybe hire like a family friend or someone or an aunt to come if we need a date night. But like, what if we don't do the nanny thing?
Yeah.
And I was like, this could actually make life easier
Yeah.
in the end, because then we become a more self-reliant system, and there's less, like, I'm going to be forced to go with the flow and have more fun. Because when you're around kids, you can't help but have have fun. So I was like, what a great, like these things that come into our lives, like you said, like these challenges, right? Like we can look at them and be like, oh man, this is the worst thing ever. But being married to an astrologer, like he sees the world in symbols. And so he's like, well, Saturn is opposing Mars right now, structures, under fire. I'm like, what is the new, then Uranus is coming in, which is about like new ideas and like breakthroughs and like reorganizing the whole thing. What's the opportunity? Like, what is the option we're not even looking at?
Yeah.
And I feel like I have a good feeling that my summer is going to be actually the best summer ever, because I'm like, yeah, dismantling these programs of productivity. And like you said, I'm just going to try to be more this summer.
No, it's so cool. And it's something that you brought up that I thought was really interesting. And I don't know, I'm really interested in like the homeschooling now. And I know that's like maybe a little off topic. I don't know, but you know, I also think it's interesting because our kids are just such different points of their lives. Because I have one who's moving to Grand Rapids because he got a job there. I have another one who's texting me about all his interviews, and then I have almost 17-year-old, and like they don't need me to do much. I'm just kind of here. But the thing is like I think about homeschooling, and if I did things different, if I knew now what I knew then, like, and if I did things different, how just so much more relaxed we all would have been.
Mm.
And like allowing my kids, or allowing any kids, to learn at their own pace, and to like have that time and that space to like be bored, right? and
Mhm.
and I think that's another thing of why we have a lot of why life is so hard, because we don't know how to be bored anymore.
Yeah.
And I think just being is part of being bored.
Yeah, like finding peace with the
Yeah,
non-doing. And I
yeah.
guess, I mean, like, is it boredom or is it just being relaxed and present in time and space?
Well, I do think some of it is like, I do think of it, some of it is boredom. Like I do think like we need to be bored so that we can be creative and learn in that space,
Ah.
right? Like we have to have that, like, I am bored. How can I change this?
Mhm,
But it
mhm.
being productive. And I think having kids learn those tools, and I'm just gonna bring kids into here, is so important. And like I was talking to a colleague about this. I'm like, we need more risky play.
Ah,
And they're like, what? What do you mean risky play? I'm like, kids need to learn more risky play so that they can navigate the world in a better way.
yeah.
And like what I love, and like just even watching videos of your girls and stuff, is you allow them to explore and do their thing. So like imagine if, like, because girls are so different than boys, like when it comes to that kind of thing. Like boys really need risky play. Like they need to be jumping, like at least my boys needed to like be jumping off things and climbing things, and creating forts, and whatever. And I think that it just helps kids navigate the world in a different way, and also makes them just better learners in general.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think too, this idea of like unstructured, like they're not going to get that time unless there's unstructured play, unstructured. And, the risky part is really interesting to me because, yeah, it's like I think we try to create so many activities for kids to keep them in safe spaces.
Right.
Um, but like, my 5-year-old is at horseback riding camp. She's like riding, she's like the tiniest little, she's like me, she's like super tiny. And the youngest kid is 9. So she's 5.
Right.
And then the next youngest is 9. And she does karate. And I'm just like, she's got a lot of fire in her and she needs
Yeah.
to express it. And,
Yeah.
I think when I was a child, I didn't get to express it. I got to express it through soccer, but like there was like a lot of fear around me being too aggressive or like too much, you're too much, Ashley.
Yeah.
And but I was like, with my girls, I want them to be too much, I want them to explore and have fun.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think you also have a background in working with kids and doing like kids camps, like teenage, like outdoor camps and like
Yeah.
rope courses and things
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you've actually seen firsthand and organized these
Yes.
experiences for kids to have high risk experiences.
Yes. So yeah, so creating that risky environment, well, it's still in a safe environment, right? So
Yeah.
like not like having kids wheeling swords around or anything.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, having them doing like, things that scare them, and I'm studying for my national exam, so I was just like looking at like zones of proximal development, right? So I was looking at Vygotsky, who talked about like learning and all of this. And I talk a lot about this when I talk to groups and work with kids. And this is going with the risky play. Like when you're in your comfort zone, and this is great for adults too, when you're in your comfort zone, very little learning can happen in your comfort zone.
Mm.
In your stretch zone, you're going to be able to learn the most because you're stretching yourself. So like this is where risky play can come in. There's still safety measures put in there, but you're doing things that are a little bit scary. So for instance, like I don't love heights, but I can totally climb on a ropes course because I know that there's safety measures in place. The worst part for me is going on the ladder, to be honest with you. The rest of it, I'm fine. But like, creating these kind of environments where it's like, this is a little bit scary, but I can do it. And I think kids can learn a lot. And then life isn't going to be as hard. And then so then I wanted to just say the last thing is the panic zone. If you can kind of be in between that stretch zone and panic zone where you might be a little freaked out,
Mm-hmm.
but you're stretching yourself, that is like the golden place to learn.
Ah,
And that is,
interesting.
and if you are able to do that effectively, you know, I feel like I'm getting like real like brain crazy right now. So like, like if you do that effectively and so you can learn, so like I think I've talked about with you before, like the window of tolerance, right? So
Yes.
like our window of tolerance is like this place you want to like chill out and hang out, right? You want to be there. You can't always be there. That'd be awesome. But like, if you get cut off by a car, you're gonna go into like hyper arousal, or like if you're like super depressed, you're in hypo arousal. So like teaching kids how to self-regulate in that way, where they get like hyped up and then they're able to bring themselves down is an amazing thing. Again, I'm in like, those are things to help our lives not be so hard, is to be able to learn
Yeah.
how to self-regulate in that way.
Yeah. And adults too, right? Like not
Adults
just
too. Oh, for
kids.
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
so to be in that stretch zone versus like in that little sweet spot of stretch and, not quite to panic, but like in that
Yeah.
space for us as adults, like, yeah, I mean, we don't do it as often. Like, I think, yeah, we kind of are a little bit like risk adverse in some ways, or we're taught to be, and
Right.
even fun adverse. And, when you were talking, I was thinking about, we have a dog trainer. We adopted a rescue mastiff. She's like a year and a half and 125 pounds, beautiful, wonderful dog, came from some trauma. And so the trainer who we've been working with was like, dogs, they learn best through play. Like if
Yeah.
you really want a dog to learn something, play with it and teach it through play. And I was like, that makes so much sense. And like, isn't there research about humans too? Like, if you want a child to learn something in like this much time, teach them through play. If you want them to learn it this much time, like teach them through memorization or
Yeah.
testing.
Play is the best way to learn. I mean, adults too. I do play therapy with adults now.
What
So
does that look like?
yeah. Well, it looks like me sitting on the floor and playing Barbie sometimes, right?
Uh-huh.
With adults who all of a sudden will start talking about things that they wouldn't have talked about if they were just sitting on the couch.
Hmm.
Right. So, doing something where like what like so like I had a client who we were talking about her childhood and how like she had a friend and like what this friend meant to her and how it kind of affected her as an adult. I don't think if we didn't introduce the Barbie play would have been the conversation that we have. Or, I'd use a lot of art therapy also. And that is very different from adults. Like NASA did this research and they were looking for like what makes a genius. And so they were looking at 5-year-olds, and 5-year-olds, 98% of 5-year-olds were geniuses because of how creative their play was.
Hmm.
And I'm going to probably quote this wrong. So if someone knows this information, I'm sorry. This is not exact, but I know that was exact. I know that number and I know what adults number is. The kind of in between stuff, I get a little jacked up. So then like at 10-year-olds, they saw like it went down to like, I think it was like 57%,
Mhm.
that they were not as creative in play. And then it was down, I think, to 23% at 15 years old. And then by the time you're adult, the genius, what they could consider genius, only went down to 2%. And it had all to do with the play and being able to be creative.
Wow. Yeah.
And and again, I think if people were allowed to be authentic, and I feel like that word is overused a lot, like our authentic self. Like I feel like people overuse it, but authentic isn't like, and I do that work with like your inner muse and your, like like
Mhm.
that's like a huge thing for me. If you What would your 5-year-old want you to be doing now? How would your 5-year-old want you to interact in the world? And I bet if you thought about that more, you would actually life wouldn't be as hard and it wouldn't feel so heavy all the time.
I love that. What would your 5-year-old have you do? Like, what would your 5-year-old see you doing as an adult? Yeah. Definitely having more fun and playing.
Yeah. Do you know what your 5-year-old would have wanted you to do as an adult?
I think I do. I think my 5-year-old would like want me to be doing more like art, like drawing and painting and playing outside, and just wandering through the woods. Like I just my like I've always just liked to be outside doing like very little, just looking. Maybe even talking to trees. That was a pastime of mine.
It makes
But I
so
think,
much sense for what you do. I love
I
that
mean,
so
I
much.
didn't grow up that much, actually, apparently. But the interesting thing is when I think about it, my 5-year-old would have me move a lot slower.
Yeah, that's
For
interesting.
you.
My 5-year-old would be on a big wheel probably, and I would be like tearing it up, right? Like, I would be jumping over the creek by my house, like as much as possible as an adult. I would be going as fast as I possibly could. Like I would be playing like a lot. There'd be a lot of outdoor play, like for me, and like I mean, like I've translated that in some ways as an adult. Like my lifting is so important. I walk every day, like at least an hour a day. I'm walking outside. I need to be moving. It's difficult for me to sit in an office. I really am like trying to figure out what that will look like because I know that I can't continue to just sit in an office all the time. Um, yeah, I would be moving a lot more. And I think like, so people probably don't know this, but I'm going to say like Ashley and I did a retreat together. I think how I behaved, at least in the retreat, is exactly what my 5-year-old would have wanted.
Yeah.
So I was teaching, I was playing, I was, you know, allowing myself to let people love me, like I think that's exactly what my 5-year-old would want.
Yeah, and we were both riding bikes in Costa Rica on these dirt roads, dodging chickens and potholes and people. That was so
Saying hi
fun.
to everyone, being really
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah. 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 That was really fun. And I wonder too if yeah, like when I travel, like there's something about traveling that makes life easier. It's like, you kind of have some of like the fear lenses and like certain parts of you that are more, I don't know, shut down, like open up. It's like that childlike curiosity really wakes up when you're in a different country or even just in a different town. Do you
Yeah.
feel like that's true?
No, totally. Like, well, I mean, I think for sure in a different country, because like I literally will talk to everybody. Whoever wants to talk to me, I'm there, right? Layla, my daughter always makes fun of me because she's like, you're doing exactly what you should do. Your job is yapping and you just yap all the time, right? So, but yeah, like I would like I'm physical. I want to give everyone hugs. I want to say hey. And like I feel like I can do that because A, they don't think I'm crazy. And B, I'll never see them again if they do.
Yeah.
But there
Yeah.
is, I mean, it's much more chill and it's, like sometimes I'll have people, when I'm doing kind of like purpose work with people, what does your ideal day look like?
Mhm.
And like, can you live by that ideal day? And I know like we all have to work and we all have to make money. Like that's just a fact. But what can you add into your ideal day, even though you have to do whatever you do to make money?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, thinking back to what would your 5-year-old, yeah, how would your 5-year-old self have you live your life? It's like, sometimes we have to, like get really clear about, well, what are those things that are should be high priority, and then actually prioritize them. The idea of like sitting down to do art is really different than, like, for me, having it written on my schedule and
Right.
being like, today, like I have to work on not being so rigid and being like, okay, at 10 a.m. I'm going to sit down. But like in the morning, I'm going to make some space and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write or I'm going to draw. Um, and like yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday I was just having a hard day. There's just some crazy astrology, and like we just got back from Vegas, and like the sitter thing happened, which was like really, hard. So I was like, my husband was like, well, what are you going to do? You're like, how are you going to handle this today? I was like, I'm going to go to the garden. Like
Yeah.
that's where I need to start, because if I start my day with the things that I love, then I know the rest of my day is going to be better because I'm going to be more in my body and more, doing things on my own. Um, and yeah, like starting from a better space. So it's like, yeah, like, do you ever counsel people to start their day with those activities, or
Oh
is it
yeah.
more just whenever you can get them in?
No, no, I always start, I ask people like what are their things that they love the most and to try to start their day with it. So for instance, like what you're just saying, like go to the garden. My first thing I do every day after I brush my teeth, and I'll do like a meditation, but after that, since it's nice outside, when it's not, it's much harder, but
Mhm.
since it's nice outside, I walk for an hour before I go to the gym.
Nice.
So, I mean, I'm studying, I'm doing like studying like that. I have to move to study, otherwise I'm like I don't learn anything. But yeah, that's what I do. But actually it's so funny you said that. When I was walking today, I saw my neighbor who doesn't live close, like they live in my neighborhood, so not my neighbor, but like, and he had like raised beds and like he was gardening, and I was like, I want to I want to tell Ashley about this. Like, how do I do this? Because like I don't, like I want to do that, but like I don't have the time, and I just use air quotes, everyone, no one sees me. But like like I don't have time for that. And I think if I loved it, which I don't know if I do or not, because I've never
Sure.
gardened, but like if I loved it, I would try to figure out a way to incorporate it.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Like I think it's great that you start off in the garden. I thought, don't you and Adam read every morning when you first get up? Or is that not
We
any habit?
did. That was a great, yeah. We used to do that when we first started dating. Then we had kids and it completely fell off. And then we started doing it when we got back. We had like like a renaissance of our romantic that started last year, and it's still going strong. But yeah, we started that again. And then when the school year hit,
Yeah.
waking up at 6:30, getting the kids out of the door by 7:30, we're going to start it next week. So actually
Okay.
starting on Monday, we're going to start our couples reading time again first thing. We're
Yeah.
really excited because yeah, that's like for us as a couple, like that's a really good place where we can start to build our bond for the day, is
Yeah.
those first hours when we wake up.
Yeah. Don and I read together sometimes, but we have been falling off lately too because of our schedules.
Yeah. And I think that's like part of life though, isn't it? It's like,
Right. Totally.
we know the things that help, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're not possible. So you have to find other ways, and other things.
Yeah.
Um, and that's part of the acceptance of the flow.
For sure. What do you think? What do you think? I know, because I know you prescribe so much to astrology, as do I, but like, do you think that you notice when you have hard days more because you know what's going on with the planets and the world, and it kind of sets a tone for you?
I mean, I think for me, I am such a creature of noticing rhythms and like patterns in the plants, patterns in the planets, patterns even in my own hormonal cycles. Like there's all these patterns. So usually what happens for me is I notice the feeling or like the emotion, then I look to the patterns that like usually it's not like, oh, Saturn's doing this and that's why I'm feeling this. It's like, why am I feeling so mad? Like, why am I feeling so trapped?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what's going on right now? Oh, it's been really, really hot. Everything's really dry. And we've got these energies in the sky right now that are opposing one another, creating friction and heat. And, so yeah. And then yeah. So I think for me, it's kind of looking outward because nothing exists on its own. And if I look to my friends and like reach out to you, it's so interesting how these patterns will show up in everyone, just a little different. Like the narrative is different, but the
Right.
patterns might be very similar of like
Right.
themes. So I love seeing that. And when I had my client practice, which I closed a few years ago, I would see these things show up and I'd be like, I wonder what, I wonder what their rising sign is, or like, I would start to think about the astrology too.
Yeah. And then I had one more question of something else you said. So you said that like I have to stop being so rigid, right? Like,
Mm,
so you're putting like a judgment on yourself,
that's true. Yeah.
which makes your life really hard when you judge yourself, right?
Yeah.
But do you think you were rigid? Do you think you like that's part of who you are? Like, even as a kid, were you rigid in some ways?
No, no, I think that was a coping strategy. I
Okay.
think I'm quite wild. I think on the inside, I'm like way less structured, rigid. Like when I'm at a dead show and I'm like dressed up, I'm swirling, twirling, dancing. Who knows where I am? I don't know where I am and I don't care. I'm free. And I think that's more my natural state. But I think growing up in the environment I did, I had very young parents and there was addiction in the house. So I had to be almost an adult very young, and I had to keep things in organized. I had to remember my schedule, knowing like I had a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
So I think I formed that as a coping mechanism, and it worked really well. I got good, like people, were like, oh, she's got her shit together, like look
Right.
at, like she presents this way and she can speak this way. And so I just was like, oh, well, I guess this is a good thing. I'm going to keep
Yeah.
this good pattern going. And then I think after I had kids was when I was like, wait a minute, this is actually really harming me. And I'm really feeling held back by this way that I am with myself and the way I'm, perceiving the world and the way I expect things of myself and others.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I also think because I'm also super rigid. Like I was talking to an Ayurvedic practitioner yesterday, and he was asking me about my my schedule in the morning. I'm like, I am up every day between 5 and 5:30. I do not use an alarm. I am like I meditate for this long. I then walk for this long. Then I go to the gym for this long. Like I was like really like, and I'm like, ick. Like
Mm,
like how I was saying it, I'm like, is that how I am? Do I need that structure? I might need that structure. I don't know. I've lived that long. I am so busy that I feel like I need that structure. But do have I created that busyness again? Like I think about this a lot. Have I created this busyness as part of a coping mechanism for myself
mm,
so that I don't have to feel things, right? Because he asked me like on a stress level, what's your stress level? I'm like, I don't feel stressed, but I think people would think I would be so stressed, right? So like, trying to connect more when you weren't allowed to really have emotions, I think, or when you felt like you weren't allowed to have emotions. Because if I asked my mom now, she'd be like, you're allowed to have emotions, but like I didn't feel like I could have emotions. Um, yeah, that I think that it's still a struggle, even if you kind of have your shit together, right? Like
yeah.
working through all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why is life so hard? And the pressure that we put on ourselves to fill our lives with so many things. I mean, it's true. Like, we make our lives so much busier
Yeah.
than they need to be. And yeah, busyness is definitely like I listened to We Can Do Hard Things. I don't know if you know that podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had like a whole episode on like busyness. And yeah, like it's true. We do this especially as women, I think, because it's easier to stay busy than to sit still and feel, and to sit still and actually deal with the things that you should be dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's
And at the same time, here's a question I have for you,
okay.
which is, is do we as humans have purpose? Like, is there a singular life purpose that we should be striving for? Or is that just made up?
So I do believe we have purpose. I do believe everyone has a purpose. I think it's dharma, right? Like what's your dharma? So how I help people get to their purpose is I do a value, like we do value work together. And I'm like, your values are not going to be the same as my values, right? So like you understanding what your values, and then are you living towards your values? So, so then you do the value work and then you do character traits, right? After you do the value work. And then how are your character traits and your values lining up? And then
Mm,
you can probably find your purpose.
interesting. So can you give me an example? Like what would be some values and character traits that would help lead someone?
Okay, so like I can do mine
Okay.
since
Yes.
I have them. So like one of my values is spirituality. My other one, I usually tell people to do your top five. So spirituality, health, curiosity, um, creativity, and I'm spacing out openness, let's just say. I don't know, I can't remember, but I know those are like some of my top ones.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the character traits actually come from there's 24 character traits. So there's this thing, it's 48 values and then 24 character traits.
Okay.
So then the character traits are things like zest for life, um like like things in wisdom, so like different kinds of things like love for learning, like so those kind of things.
Yeah.
So for instance, so for me, spirituality, health, I'm just going to use those right now, and creativity, those like really are my top three for sure. Okay. And so with my character traits, so let's just say adventure, zest for life, and love for learning. Okay, like I'm gonna pick those are my kind of my top things. What am I doing? What is my dharma, and what am I creating my purpose about? Well, one of the things I love to do is educating, right? So I
Mhm.
love teaching, and I think that part of the reason why I think I love doing the podcast so much, especially when I do like my episodes where someone asks me a question, is it gives me the opportunity to teach a little bit. So I love that part. I love I love being able to, I'm curious, like I love to listen to people and creative, and I love to figure out different ways to help them because I don't prescribe to one theory in therapy, right? Like I am trained in DBT, I'm trained in CBT, I'm trained in like I have like all this different training. I don't use just one of them. I get to know the person and figure out from there. So like again, so it's creative. You have to be creative to do that. If you're more rigid and you're like I am this kind of therapist and that's all I'm doing. And then like this zest for living, like I'm like I love to travel, and like so like I'm willing, like I'm going to Camp Punk in Pennsylvania, right? So I think this was probably actually air afterwards, but like I'm willing to go to different places and meet new people and try new things and learn from people and learn from people's experiences to, so that's kind of how I find my purpose. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, because I think I just wanted to hear an example so I could kind of flush it out. And I was thinking the listeners might be like, oh, yeah, like what are their maybe top three? And then what are the character traits? Because then it's like once you have those clear, then you can say, yeah, like what am I doing with my life? And are those being honored? Because
Yeah,
I
for
think when we're
sure.
not authentic, it's when those things don't match up,
Totally.
right? And I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting because I mean, one of the things that I've kind of had to not battle with, but struggled with for a long time was that, I'm an herbalist and I love plants. I work with plants. I'm a gardener. I'm outdoors. I love educating people, but I also love makeup and beauty and like pretty things. And like you and I, when we were traveling, like we both like kind of
We're
fancy
fancy.
accommodations. Yeah. We
Yeah.
like zhuzhy things. But like for me, for such a long time, I felt like I couldn't be like the part of me that liked beautiful things because I'm double Taurus and I have a lot of Venus energy in my chart. I felt like, well, I can't be a natural hippie and love beauty and luxury. And then I think, in my 40s, that midlife opportunity,
Yeah.
I was like, who said so? Who said I can't love plants and be an advocate for nature and take good care of myself and play with
Yeah.
makeup and like really explore my Venusian side and like actually embody it all? Like, who says I can't do that?
Right.
And now that I'm like living that, um, I am so much happier. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
why is life so hard? Well, it was hard when I felt like I was trying to fill this image of what my
Yeah,
professional self was supposed to look like.
totally. And it's funny that you say that, because I also love fancy things, but like, I don't know if I love pretty things. Like I love looking at pretty things, but like I have no, like I don't like makeup, and I don't like I don't like doing, like I don't like spending the time on taking
Yeah.
care of myself in that way. But like when I first was like, okay, I'm leaving education and I'm going to be a therapist full time, I was wearing like dresses all the time and stuff. And like, I was trying to like fit this image. And I'm like, this is not me. Like yesterday, I went to work right after working out, right? Like, I mean, I shower, everyone I shower. So
She didn't show up stinky, everyone.
no, I'm like, I'm showering, but like, I was wearing like shorts and a t-shirt. And I was like, if someone doesn't like that I'm dressed like this because I'm supposed to be professional, I'm probably not the right therapist for them.
Mm,
Right.
I
And
love that.
like taking like who I am, and that's kind of how I like kind of like evolved in this hardcore therapist, because like I'm an observer of people and I see that I'm very different than other people who do therapy.
And that's what makes you special. And that's why people, I mean, I remember when you rebranded a few years ago to the hardcore therapist, and I was like, yes, because it felt like you. It was like, oh, look at Sarah taking her therapy work and stepping into like her love of hardcore music. And like, yeah, I was like, this is so cool. And like all your merch and like the work you're doing to raise money for people who can't afford mental health care. Like, I was like, oh, this is super cool. And yeah, like this is definitely not the traditional therapist path.
Right.
And I think that's why you're doing so well. That's why that's why your schedule's booked. That's why you get invited to do cool things at camps and like, but I do think doesn't it take some hard knocks though, right? Like, why is life
Oh
so
yeah.
hard? This was
I've
something,
done some stupid things to get to
yeah.
where yeah, like I spent lots of money on things I shouldn't have spent money on that were not helpful. Like I want to believe people when they tell me they're going to help me and they don't, right? Like it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
you
went
definitely learn.
so much schooling. Like I did so much extra schooling to try to figure out all the things, right? Like it's amazing
Yeah.
that, yeah. And that, yes. So yes, we have hard knocks. Go on.
So I was just so Adam and I were talking. I'm like, gosh, I spent a lot of time with my husband, don't I? Because it's like
It's good.
it's great. I'm very happy about it. But we were talking. We had a campfire the other night, and he was sharing. I forget who said this, but he was like, there's a quote that's like, may the greatest blessing you can ever give someone is may your problems be interesting ones.
Oh, that's good.
Isn't that good?
Wait, did
May
he say that? Did he find that quote?
he's like one of those people that's like an encyclopedic dictionary. He remembered it from, I think, a logic class he took in college. I don't know. He was like, well, so and so said blah blah blah. But yeah, and I'm probably not getting it completely right, but yeah, may your problems be interesting ones. And that, like, we've been talking about that a lot the last few days. Like, at least we have interesting problems, like at least interesting to yourself, right? So it's like for each of us, life is going to be hard. But like, can you make your problems at least be interesting ones?
For sure. For sure. That's great. Yes. Well,
Oh,
I was just actually thinking about like how people would think my life is so like mine and Don's life is so hard because we don't live in the same state. I'm like, but it's super interesting, isn't it? Like,
yeah, you have a completely different set of challenges that you have to face as a married couple living in
right.
different states. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
is super interesting. That's like, yeah, like that's like a very unique situation.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so funny because he's texting me right now. Uh and he's
I
just
feel
like,
like
oh,
husbands have this like radar where they're
I
like,
know.
my wife is engaged in something she's really
Right.
interested in. Can I just like let me distract her? Because she's getting too focused on something other than me.
Literally. I'm like, aren't you teaching? It's your last day of school. Finish.
Oh, that's sweet though. We'll take that as like, that's so
No,
sweet.
it was super sweet. He was showing me an Airbnb that I sent him for when we were traveling together. So he was like, I like this one. So
Oh, that's fun.
well, we'll go there. Um,
Yes,
but yeah, no, I do think I love that quote. I kind of want it. Will you send me that? Will you
I
text me
will.
that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I'll
perfect.
text it to you.
But I do think it's like problems can be interesting, but when it gets really hard, right, is when you ruminate on things that you have no control over.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And I think that's another aspect. Like the more we we're talking about it, I'm like, this is another way people make things really hard, right? So like I'll use Don and I. So as my viewers know, my husband and I live, he's in Oregon and I'm in Michigan, and we travel back and forth to see each other. We try for the 6 to 8 week mark. It never seems to happen. Sometimes we're seeing each other a lot, and then other times we can go like 4 months without seeing each other. So and we've been together almost 5 years. And um the thing is like people are like, when are you moving there? What are you doing? Blah, 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 like asking me like 6 bazillion questions, like, oh, Layla's graduating from high school next year, so you must be moving to Oregon. And I'm like, slow down, right? Because I don't ruminate on those kind of things, because that would make my life really difficult. Focusing on things I can like, I say this often, but like anxiety is if you are so focused on the future. Depression is when you focus too much on the past.
Mm,
And
wow.
so I am a worrier and I am anxious by nature. Like that is something, that's just how I am. I cannot add that to my life, because that would just make my life harder, and it would make our marriage harder, because the expectations would be like, God, when are you moving here? Why are you like, why did you decide to change this or whatever? Like all of those pieces. Um, so that is something in our marriage that I think other people try to insert,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
it's not traditional.
right. Yeah. It reminds me of the serenity prayer,
God grant me the
God
serenity.
grant me the serenity to accept the things
I cannot
I cannot
change,
change
the
and the
courage to
courage
change
to
the things
change the
that,
things I can.
and
And
the
the
wisdom know the difference.
yes.
Thank you, Eleanor.
I know, right? Like that. Yeah, Sarah and I are both in Al-Anon. So yeah, that has been a game changer, because I think, yeah, like accepting the things you cannot change, and then knowing when, like, actually no, it's actually this is on your plate now.
Yeah,
This is something that you have to do. And it's that it takes wisdom to be able
yeah,
to know the difference between those two, and not to try to push a boulder up a hill
yeah,
um when it's on a conveyor belt. Like someone else has that boulder, it's just on pause. Like, stop
right.
pushing, it'll start moving.
Exactly. That's also an interesting thing that I really appreciate. Like, I talked to another person recently about being an Al-Anon, and like how much Al-Anon and therapy, like together,
Could you
help.
just say for the listener what Al-Anon is? Because I'm thinking
Oh,
that maybe there might be a few people that are like, what is Al-Anon?
sure. So Al-Anon is for family and friends who are affected by an alcoholic in their life. This is essentially what it is. It's a 12-step group like AA, NA, all those things, where you come together, and it's a community group. So it's not led by a professional. And it's a community group where you share your strength, hope, and courage. It's really, that's what I think of it.
I love it. No, you nailed it.
Um, where was I at with Al-Anon? I was talking, oh, Al-Anon and therapy. Um, because before Al-Anon and therapy, I used to say all the time, it was like, my mantra was like, I thrive in chaos.
Mm.
Gross. Like that is so gross. That is essentially saying I am making my life harder than it needs to be.
Wow. How did you figure out that you didn't want to do that anymore? So Al-Anon and therapy, or was
Yeah.
there like a turning point?
Yeah. So my turning point, and I've talked about this a little bit before. I was in a relationship on and off from high school after my divorce with my first husband, with someone who was a heroin addict, who told me he was clean when we got back together. He was not. And I was doing wild things to keep the relationship going and to keep keep things secret and like all the things. I was acting wild. I was not acting towards my values at all.
Mm.
And I think that that's an interesting thing that I actually think that's important to know, because sometimes you have addict-like behavior and need a 12-step program because of that.
Mm.
Right. And so that was kind of for me was it. I always thought when I first was going to go to Al-Anon, I always thought it was, how can I help change him?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people go in thinking that. But yeah, so yeah, it was at a point where I couldn't live that way anymore. It was just, it was, I was afraid that my ex-husband might take my kids away, even though he was never in the house when my kids were. But there's a situation, he broke into my house when my kids were there, and
Mm.
I was afraid of that. I was afraid of losing my job. And just I hit my personal rock bottom, right? He stole a ton of money from me, like my personal rock bottom. And I so I found a therapist who dealt with intense chronic trauma, right? So I had CPTSD. And and then I started going to Al-Anon, and like Al-Anon became like, I went like any day I didn't have the kids, I was at an Al-Anon meeting. I don't do that anymore. I do go to Al-Anon meetings still once in a while, but I don't go like I did then. And I did all the steps. I started going to like even community AA meetings just for other people's hope.
Mm.
And I did a ton of inner child work myself. And I think I'm very thankful that that experience happened to me, because I don't know if I would have ended up becoming a therapist if it wasn't for that.
Wow. Wow. That's really cool. Yeah. And I love, it's like you were wise enough to know the mantra you were living by. And then you, through life's interesting problems,
Yes.
you found a way out and you found resources.
Yes.
And I think that's another point here is like, why is life so hard? And I think part of it is because we don't utilize the resources that we have around us,
Totally.
right? Like there is so much access now to therapy where there wasn't before.
Right.
There is more access to like community health care. I
Yep.
think, I mean, it could be way better here in the US. I still think it's a broken
Totally.
system, but like there's more access to that. Um, there's like a lot of community gardens and support groups and like
Yeah.
places like Al-Anon and AA that are free.
Yeah.
There's
I'm
religious
all about
communities.
community groups.
Yeah, I think
Um,
community groups. I mean, do you remember when like meetups was like the big thing
yes.
online? And like you would be like, oh, there's a hiking group meetup. And I had like a Kundalini yoga meetup. But like that actually, I think that still exists, but there's like more organic ways. People are just getting together. And
Yeah,
I think life is a lot less hard when you utilize those resources, when you
for
find
sure.
friends like I can just call you up and be like, Sarah, I'm going to rant for a few minutes. Here we go. And I know you will be there and listen. And I know
Yeah.
that you can call me
Like,
anytime and you can
yeah, for
just,
sure.
like express your feelings in a safe place. And, I wish for people that are listening, if nothing else that they get from our conversation today is, I guess, a few points, which is, the first one, which is often we make our lives harder than they need to be, right? Like we're kind of self-perpetuating child traumas and old patterns that we don't actually need to do anymore.
Right.
That we have these amazing resources probably right in our backyards. Like, I mean, for me, it's an herbalist literally in my backyard, like herbs, but like also, in our communities, we've got all
Yeah.
of these people that are like there that we might not even be leaning on. What would be some of your top takeaways?
Well, I think like I definitely think community groups are really important and people need to lean into community more. I think if we were less individualistic society and less living, like isolated, being on our own islands, I think we would have I would think there'd be a lot less mental health issues actually going on. But yeah, I think community groups are really important. I'm a huge proponent of exercise, obviously. Like if people exercised more, like life wouldn't feel so hard, I think. Because if you're hurting all the time, life is hard when you feel garbagey. I do think food is also a really important thing when it comes to, we didn't even really touch upon that either, is like punishment of food makes life really hard, or any of, there's so much, like, I feel like we could do a series of this actually.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think like, eating, foods and spending time with people who you can count on and love. And even if it's like through Zoom, like I have like a Zoom community groups that I do, and I think they're great. And I, I don't know that everyone believes in like a spirituality or feeling like something bigger than them, but like, I don't know, that really helped me a lot, was knowing that there was something out there that was greater than me. And that can be community, that can be nature. It doesn't have to be Krishna or Buddha or Jesus or whoever. It can be whatever it is. And I think like knowing you're not alone is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with all of those. And yeah, diet nutrition is huge. We should do a talk. Maybe our next one can be like yeah, diet, like food and nutrition and exercise and why it makes life easier or something like
Yeah,
that.
no, for sure. I actually just did a podcast on that. And the second part of the podcast, I don't know if you listened to my Wednesday podcast, you probably didn't have
I haven't
time.
yet, but
Yeah.
I do listen to your podcast.
Yeah, but I actually, someone asked me to talk, like, if I could talk about like herbs and tinctures and stuff for anxiety and
Oh,
depression.
I can do that.
And I was like, I need Ashley. And I actually said it on the podcast. Like, I'm gonna talk to my friend Ashley and let you know.
Yeah, no, that's my jam. I do a lot of work with that. So I would love to.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that this is actually a really cool conversation that, having, I love also that you have notes and I'm sitting here just like, blah. Like,
We're like, I feel like you and I are kind of like the yin and yang. Like you're like super tall and I'm like super short. So when we were like out in Costa Rica, it was like, big person, very little person.
and you're like blonde and my hair's
Yeah,
so dark.
I love it though. I think
It
it's
was,
so
yeah,
sweet.
you are, yeah, yeah. I might get like really spazzy and you're like, go in the water. Like, yeah, that was great.
Oh, but I think these conversations, like, yeah, there's such a nice, I think just because we've built a friendship for so long,
Yeah,
like there's so much material that I think we can cover in a very easy way. So I would love to continue this conversation.
for
And
sure.
yeah, you can count on me for notes. I can count on you for stories and like cool insights. And yeah, we can just keep it going.
Yeah, like Ashley's the most organized, and I'm like I feel like if you saw my office right now, you'd be like, okay, what are you doing? You're doing this stuff all over the floor. But I do think it's important, like as women too. I think this is another important thing that we didn't touch upon. Like, I think women need to start leaning more on other women.
Yeah.
And I think that would help with life being so hard also.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things you said, because like we leave like voice memos back and forth, you were like, Ashley, I love your messages because you're just real. Like you just say what's real to you. And I feel like that's one thing that I think helps life not be so hard is when you can just have a friend who you can just talk real talk. Like the voice that you talk to yourself in, if you can talk to someone else using those,
Yeah,
like using that part of you, and know that you're going to be loved and accepted. It's like there's just it's so important, I think.
sure.
So
Yay.
I love
Let's
you.
go. I love you. This is
Awesome.
the best. I also love like, I just think it's funny, like my two closest girlfriends are both like into the dead, and I'm like this wild hardcore girl. You're both
Well, we'll
like,
have to take each other into each other's worlds
I
sometime
know,
soon.
I know, I know. I'm actually sad I didn't go. I would have loved to go to Vegas to see that. It's
Yeah,
wild.
so good. Oh my gosh, yeah. So good.
Well, like, I don't know, and I just want to say this really quick and then we can go. But like, I like the
The
whatever
sphere.
that sphere, that was wild.
So cool.
It
Yeah.
was like you were in like a Grateful Dead snow globe.
Yes, it's exactly what it was like. And they had like all these like super psychedelic images and like, iconography from like their past in like Haight Ashbury. And it was just, and everyone was smiling and like, oh, it was like, yeah, it was like we had our own world, our
Wait, so is
own.
John Mayer still playing with them?
Oh, yeah. And he's awesome. He's
Yeah, he
like,
was great.
he's so talented. And like, but the way him and Bob Weir like look at each other,
I
it's
know.
like it makes me like I was like crying at one point. I was like, you know, it's like he's adopted John Mayer, and like there's this transmission
Yeah.
of like wisdom that's happening between them, which is cool because you know when Jerry died, everyone was like, "Oh man, is this going to live? Is this music going to live on?" And here we are, you know, some 20 years later, and it's
Yeah.
still going strong. So it's
No,
pretty
it's
neat.
super cool. Actually, I saw Dead and Company in Chicago.
What?
I saw John Mayer. Yeah. It was great.
Cool. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I just think it's really important to see lots of different kinds of music too. Like my daughter loves country, so like that's another thing. Like I'll probably go to some country concert or something. But yeah.
And I feel like I wouldn't go to a hardcore concert with anyone but you because I am a little afraid. But
I'd
when
let you stand on, we'll when we can go, we'll have to go where we can stand on the stage because I think that would make you most comfortable.
okay, I like that. As a little person, I'm like, I could get trampled. It happened
Yeah.
at Lollapalooza in 97. So it's
We don't
okay.
want you to get trampled. Okay. I love you. This
I
was
love you
amazing.
too. Thank you for
And
this conversation.
for
Yeah,
sure. I'm so excited that we're gonna do this again. And I would love to get, I have another friend who's an herbalist on again that I would love to have like all three of us talking together.
perfect. I love that too.
Okay, cool. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.